Wonderful. It's working. I'm Gina Mikel Petrie.
And I'm James Patrick Ryan, since we're using our all three names.
And trying to see what's showing up on the screen here. Find myself. There we go. Okay, we're both showing up here. So I had a dream to create a series of courses, non-credit, that could be offered through PCE. And all I knew was that I wanted them to be very different. I also have very little technology skills, as many of you might actually already know. And so I was really puzzling, really puzzling about how I could move forward with creating these courses. And I heard that someone was going to join our university who was going to work on exactly these kinds of issues. So how to reshape our curriculum and our pedagogy in ways that gamified it, which I wasn't sure exactly. I knew what that meant, but it felt like the right direction. So I sent an email on what turned out to be Jim Ryan's first day on campus.
She pounced.
I did. And I lured him into collaborating over all of this. All right, let's see. There we go. So, do you want to walk us through what we're going to do?
Yeah, so for today, basically, we're going to be talking about our origin story and the goals and the role of gamification, as well as the role of the tools that you're going to be using.
Oh, do you want to go back to
yeah,
what's coming up?
Yeah.
There we go.
I mean, so that's what we're going to cover today. On the 23rd, it's going to be a little bit more hands-on. So if you want to learn about all the tools that are available through EWU and that are also freely available, such as AI, podcasting, and video, I'll be covering that more on the 23rd. And then once the 30th rolls around, hopefully everybody's going to be wearing Halloween costumes. And we'll talk a little bit more about the result and impact on future curriculum design. And maybe we'll get a little bit of feedback about how your students reacted to the content and how the course was.
Absolutely. And when I think about the October 23rd session, I think of it as kind of a technology petting zoo where we'll actually get to take a look at these different technologies that were a part of, I think, what was key to kind of bringing my course together. And as I mentioned, I'm not really skilled with technology. So if I can learn this stuff, so can you. Pretty short.
Well, don't sell yourself short, because it wasn't one course that you were designing. It was 9 courses. And what was the time span that we started on? Was it from?
I think basically we worked from April through the end of August.
Right. So from April, August, we were able to pump out 9 courses, which in my 15 years of working in instructional design technology, I've never been able to accomplish that before. So Gene made that all possible.
Well,
Vision.
Because of the gamification, which you're going to find out.
You used to be the one with the clicker.
Yeah, I know. I'm used to driving. Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what it was that I was striving for. I mentioned that I was having a dream of a different type of TEFL certificate. And I know you don't really need to know specifically about my discipline, but for overseas employers, when they hire teachers for English, what they're looking for is either something called a TESOL certificate, which I already had on campus. It's my minor, which becomes a certificate, or a TEFL, Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate. And TEFL certificates tend to be hyper-focused on the realities of teaching overseas. And they make the assumption that you, for the most part, that you're coming from a US cultural background. And so you're thinking through some of these issues with that lens, for example. And so as I was thinking about a TEFL certificate, hyper-focused on teaching overseas, that could take advantage of all these polls I was seeing that a lot of people were thinking about moving overseas. And I thought, well, they need work, so they could get a TEFL certificate through EW's PCE. I knew it needed to be mobile friendly. So my online asynchronous courses here at the university are completely built with the assumption you're using a laptop at least. And I really wanted to create courses that used your phone in the way that I was already using my phone. So, for example, to listen to podcasts rather than to watch video. And most of my classes have videos actually that the students watch of me sitting in a Patterson classroom. It's very exciting. But I just really was looking for that kind of engagement. Sometimes you're online and there's little mini quizzes on things, and I'm actually learning as I'm taking those. So I was really looking for that kind of engagement. I also, very unlike my on campus courses, I did not want to focus on theories. And I really, whenever possible, my instinct was I don't even want to name them. All I want to do is to provide people with what are the behaviors they need to carry out to be successful. Because if they took all 9 of these courses, they could take them in as short as 3 months. That if I expected that this would be successful in helping them get jobs teaching English overseas, and that means in 3 months they'd be entering the profession. So there wasn't much time to kind of spend a lot of time on theoretical frameworks, but rather do this, not that. When you have a decision, this is the better way to go. I also knew that because people were going to enter the profession so quickly, if this project worked, that every one of the courses, the final product needed to be a real product. And my vision was something that they could include with their application to apply to a job to teach English overseas. So, for example, their teaching philosophy, their curriculum vitae, that kind of thing. And I also knew that anyone who was interested in getting a job teaching English overseas is curious about the world. They like travel. They are curious about culture and places and the differences and the similarities that they experience. And so I knew I wanted to harness that in some way, but I didn't know how. And the final thing that I was striving for is, when I was learning how to teach English, it was 2 years in a master's program, and then all of those years as a baby teacher as I was developing. These folks, if the program worked, in 3 months, they would be out there joining the profession. So I wanted to find a way for them to immediately begin their entry into that professional conversation. And again, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted that to look like.
Okay. So, like Gina said, it was literally my first day on the job. I had just sat down at my desk and I received this email, and I was excited because the first day on the job I had something that I could actually do that was meaningful towards what my profession was all about. And my goal, like my initial striving goal and what I hope to impart to you is that creating courses should be an adventure in discovery, in learning, not just for the students, but for you. It should be something that's exciting and fulfilling, intellectually and emotionally when you're creating these things. And I want people to feel that on both sides of the equation, both the instructor and the teachers, when they're inspired, when they're excited, when they're having fun, real learning is happening and real discovery is happening. And
Which you got. I mean, I know that's what you were striving for, but we'll talk about this later, but I'm a different person after going through this. I can't teach the same anymore. I see my content differently now, which I think was part of your goal.
it
Right?
really was. And it was only really possible to do one-on-one at the time, but the impact that it's had has been really amazing, and seeing how you move forward with it beyond what even I was thinking of has been really incredible. And then again, blowing people's minds with possibilities. I think what I did was I bagged up my computer and all the other tools that I had with me at the time, and I ran over to Gina's office and I immediately started showing her all the cool things that could be done with AI imagery,
Yeah.
and told her about the options that could be done with videos and podcasting. And I think I went a little overboard, and then I made you feel a little bit overwhelmed with what was there. So what did that feel like on your side?
It was a little overwhelming,
Uh-huh.
and actually I started to get a little scared because I was already in. I was all in on my vision of these 9 courses. But when you started showing me all these technologies, they didn't look especially difficult, but I was trying to like even memorize them. Like you were click here, click there, then you do this. And I couldn't memorize it fast enough. So I actually started to get a little scared that I wouldn't meet my dream
Mhm.
because I wouldn't be able to learn all of these different pieces. So it was just a little bit overwhelming. On the other hand, you were like, yeah, this is doable.
Mhm.
So I could see there were tools available.
Yeah, a lot of it can seem overwhelming because of the technology, but we've come so far in such a short amount of time that that big barrier that can seem like it's completely insurmountable has really come down. It's been made easier for each individual to be able to use. You don't need to spend years learning how to use a specific program. You can spend an afternoon and get a pretty good idea for what it was. And one of the ways I think I did this is I started my own podcast, the Play Learn podcast. And part of me doing that was showing you how easy it could be just to sit in front of somebody with a microphone and just record having a nice conversation about whatever the topic of interest was.
Yeah.
And that's part of why shining a light of what the end result can look like. So at the very end of it, you were like, oh, this is what it looks like. This is how it can look in my classroom.
Yep.
I want to do this. I want to have this cool stuff
Yeah.
that I can impart on to my students.
It totally worked. Yeah, that did. That did. Yeah.
And then at that time, my role was very specific to in guiding instructors individually through this whole process. So this is what the navigating through the challenges and the workload, in that we had to figure out what a big workload this was going to be.
Yeah.
And there had to be a bit of a division of labor to figure out who could do what
Yeah.
tools were appropriate for what situation. But then once we figured that out, we just put our noses down and went straight at it.
Yeah. We also had to work out a communication pattern,
Mhm.
like creating Google folders
Right.
and even color coding or marking things, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the last thing I was striving here for is to build courses and content that are engaging and easily updatable. And when you're talking about the specific tools that we're using and the ease at which people are able to produce that content, that also makes it very easy to make it updatable on the fly, because information changes, people change, situations change. That's going to require updating about different parts of the courses as you move forward. And so to be able to take something out and switch it out for something else, that makes a huge difference. It makes it so that you don't have to spend a lot of time changing everything about your course. You can just, it's modular. You can
Yeah.
just pick and choose and do what you want to do.
Yeah.
So I think, was this what you were going to talk about or what I was going to talk about?
Yeah, I think this is what I wanted to highlight.
Yeah.
So I went into the conversation with these instincts about what I wanted to do. And then from those early conversations with Jim, who brought this understanding of gamification and what that can look like. And I still have to admit, I'm still not sure what gamification is really, but to me, it's a cluster of ideas that all lead to a different kind of engagement than I've actually ever kind of introduced, I think, to my students before. So when I'm taking this apart, it's kind of, what does gamification mean to me? One of the things that the conversations with Jim kicked off for me that helped me design the courses in a different way is, I heard over and over again, have stories, cycle around stories, find ways to kind of weave these threads throughout your course. So, for example, one of the ways I did it with one of the courses is to pose a question for each one of the interviews I carried out on the podcast. And there were 6 modules for each course, 6 podcasts, is to ask the same question of the interviewer. I think for one of the courses, the question was, what do you think makes a strong instructor of English? And then kind of build on that kind of developing understanding as we move through the podcast. So having some kind of story element, that was new for me. I hadn't thought of it that way. Another thing, a real light bulb went on for me when Jim was talking about gamification, and I just remember gamification. And I think I must have like said something like, so what exactly could that look like? And he said, so for example, at the end of your course, you probably want students to look back over the modules, one last look before they go, like to just kind of have a sense of reminding themselves of what was there and maybe synthesizing it in a new way that they hadn't done before. And you're going to of course have them doing that for your final product, but what if you gamified that reason? And I'm like, what could that look like? And he said, for example, and he knew already that I wanted to harness students' natural interests about the world and places around the world. And so he said, for example, what you could do is you could, for each of the 9 courses, you choose a country that's going to be highlighted. You don't announce it. And each of your podcasts has a picture at the top. It's created through AI and it shows a different scene from the country. So, for example, there's a cafe scene, there's a classroom scene. And so you could then at the end of the course say to students, hey, look back over our course. We've actually been visiting a country. I called it that country we were visiting. For this, take this non-credit quiz and tell me which country you think we were visiting. And I think I impressed Jim a little bit.
Sure.
I took it up a notch. And what I did was that one of the images, or more than one of the images, had a picture of a teacher, and it was the same teacher. If they appeared more than once, it was the same teacher appearing. Maybe there was a picture of a classroom with the teacher at the front, clearly the teacher. And whichever podcast that image appears on the Canvas page for, if you see the teacher, that means the name of the country is mentioned somewhere in that podcast. So the whole idea was when we were on our game, and we weren't always, because I made these courses with a wonderful designer, Catherine Kemble, who was my former student. The podcast that we most wanted to lure people back to, we would place that image and make sure to mention that country. We would manufacture sometimes it was natural, sometimes it was manufactured, why the name of that country came up. So that was the real moment that I kind of understood at a deeper level how gamification can work and how you can harness it to really get a different kind of level of learning engagement for your students.
It's a high level, where's Waldo?
Yep, high level where's Waldo? Exactly. Another thing that I got from Jim that I would not have gotten if we wouldn't have started engaging in those conversations is, instead of providing that content, that those, that what people needed to be thinking about, how to make decisions for teaching English, instead of doing that in monologue form, which is most of what I've done in my online asynchronous, to stick to dialogues. And so for 5 of the 6 podcasts for each one of the 9 courses, I did interviews. And that was a goat rodeo in its own, because I was reconnecting. I was thinking about all the people I've met in my profession over the years. And I was thinking about either a story that they had shared that, Ira Glass from This American Life says we've all got that one good story. I think he's wrong. I think we've all got multiple good stories, but it's true. Everybody does have that one zinger of a story. So thinking about what people's stories were, or if I couldn't think of a specific story, thinking about the kinds of things they've experienced and just guessing that there might be a story there. And then setting up all of these interviews. It was insane. It was a lot. But the final thing was, I said something along the lines of, but shouldn't, I know I'm doing audio, but shouldn't students see me? And Jim said, yes. What if you did an intro and a closing video, just really short, and you're bringing them into the course and then you're closing it with them? But he said, don't be just sitting in a Patterson classroom with a camera on you, which is what I've always done. He said, there needs to be a place that's meaningful. You need to have action going on. And I'm thinking, oh, what does this mean? Do I just like, I don't know, stand somewhere downtown Spokane and make this? And I needed it to make sense with the curriculum. I needed there to be a natural connection. Lucky for me, I have a condition called synesthesia. Anybody put your hand up if you know what it is?
Oh, I don't see.
No, nobody does. Okay. So I could tell you.
You does.
Oh, isn't it? It is.
Yes, where you mix up your senses and
Yes, yes.
yeah, taste and smell sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's when senses get mixed up, and I won't tell you my whole childhood story of discovering I had synesthesia, but what I will say is that I think in images. And so, for example, if I'm having a conversation with you and you're describing a problem that you're experiencing that we're working together or we're going to collaborate on, often what will happen, I don't say it, but an image will just plant itself in my mind. What I have to do really quickly is to decode what that image is. So I leaned in and I allowed myself to ask myself, what is the key idea for each one of these courses? And then I chose a place in Spokane, got permission, and I chose a place. And that is where I did my opening and my closing video. And I name it for students. I say, why do you think I'm here? Here's why I am here. So for example, there's a course. One of the courses is on basically finding a position and getting a position successfully in teaching English as a foreign language. And I got permission to videotape it at children's, I think it's called Children's Tree. It's so embarrassing. It's in my neighborhood and I can't remember the name of the children's bookstore. Yeah, I think it's called the Wishing Tree. That's it, the children's bookstore. And that's what came up when I was thinking about that course. So I'm decoding why am I thinking of that? Because that is a place that's full of stories. And to get a job in teaching English as a foreign language, you really have to be able to tell your story. You have to be able to, in the ways that matter in our profession, talk about your experiences, talk about what your goals are, talk about what your strengths are right now. So you're really telling your story. So I just leaned into that synesthesia and I think it might have worked.
Yeah. So this is just a little bit of the workflow, how it looked as far as our process went between our first meeting. You've already heard some of this already, the strategizing, actually the tools. And then this is the part that I think we could dive into a little bit further when it comes to identifying and working with stakeholders. So, we'd already decided that, or well, you'd already decided that you wanted to try the podcasting way. So how did you put it together? Like who you picked out and why you picked them out? And what did you learn from those conversations with them that you didn't already know?
Yeah. So I have this through the generosity of my department. I have the giant whiteboard in my office in Patterson. And so I had it all. I don't know if you remember, Jim, I had it all mapped out. And I started with those stakeholders, those folks I could interview, I could imagine contributing to this project. I started with those that I was pretty sure I know what story they might be able to tell. And I communicated with them and, usually I confirmed it was correct. And so once we knew what the 9 courses were, I was literally putting their name up on the board for even which module, because 9 courses, 6 modules, insane. And then for others that I just thought would be amazing to have their voice be a part of the course, I was sending them open-ended emails. Often it was a little over, I tried at first reaching out, with lots of different questions, like questions that would point them towards the course on reading, or it was too overwhelming.
Mhm.
So I had to kind of narrow it down a little bit and say, here's 3 things I can imagine really being able to talk about. And then I would have a meeting with them on Zoom. And when they could talk about multiple things, I always said the same thing: which one would give you more joy to talk about? Because one thing I heard from Jim is if we're having fun while we're making the podcast, the students are going to have fun, was right to it. So does that kind of tell you what I was thinking of?
Sure, yeah.
Stakeholders? Yeah.
Yeah. But the big one is what new things did you learn while talking to, like, there had to be some kind of learning, something that you got out of the podcast as well that you might not have realized before.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I realized is I shouldn't have waited 25 years into my career to have done this. Like, this is the way I should have started out my career. I wish someone would have given me this homework assignment because, by the end, when we were just cranking them out like this, I was sometimes doing 3 interviews a day.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so that's a lot of learning just right, piled up on top of each other. Well, here's one example. I had never really understood, even though I've heard it in small ways from people over time, I never really understood how much a country's assessment of English learning completely determines what students and teachers expect in the classroom. And that was so present in so many of the interviews, even if that's not what I was asking about. And I'd never, so what happened was things that people shared, it often wasn't something that I never heard before. It just had never resonated like that with me. And it just it's almost like it found its place of value when my way of seeing the world.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, and I'll switch into the navigating and the challenges here. And you already mentioned some of it. Now, again, this was 9 courses. This was 9 courses. It was absolutely insane. I would only recommend in the same amount of time designing 1 course for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah.
Like, having to do this much was incredible. And the only way you can get through all that is through organization, organization, organization. You had to do so much scheduling. You had to record on these specific times. Then we had to relate that between the two of us. We had to figure out what the titles of each thing were going to be. Sometimes the files got lost and things had to be redone. So there's a lot of technical aspects that come into play. And then you really have to keep in mind time.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, this was 9 courses that had to be all done by the time September rolled around.
The end of August.
The end of August.
And well, I'm the type A. So in truth, Catherine and I had told everyone we'd be done by the end of August. We had set a completely different goal for ourselves. We just hadn't told anyone. I don't even think we told you. We wanted to be done August 1. No, no, it took all 30 days. It was insane because we also had to move through IT, right? We had to get all of those approvals. And even though we had done our best to make sure that all the images were accessible, and yeah, we still had lots of things to fix.
I guess we jumped through a few of those, eight and 6 for IT. But let's just jump into 7 really quick because you and Catherine had to do quite a bit of building work in Canvas.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you had to take all that content and make it plug and play and make everything make sense with the imagery, the videos, the audio?
Yeah. You reach in this kind of project, you reach a certain point where you just have to leap in and start designing in Canvas.
Mhm.
Like, Jim made fun of me. I'm the only person in the world with a 72-page Google Doc.
I didn't make fun. I thought it was amazing. I'd never seen anybody
Like, I'm that kind of person. Like, I really hold on trying to plan as much because I hate the idea of making a mistake and then you've got to clean it up in the next 3 or 4 courses, that kind of thing. But we took that leap and we started to place it in there. And I had actually at first, I had the same feeling I always have when I jump into Canvas because I've got this rich learning in my head. And then you start using Canvas and it's like, that's it. That's all it looks like all that work. And, but then as Jim was finishing up helping me with the videos and the podcasts and we're popping them in there and we're starting to put the images of the country, for each one, it did kind of jazz it up a little bit. But those decisions about exactly what you say to the prompt that you give someone before they listen to a podcast, it takes a lot of time. It's like writing poetry, I suppose. You put all this effort into it and you end up with like 7 words or something. So,
Pretty much so.
yeah.
So then after you got all that done, you had to go through the IT
Yep.
review.
Yeah.
And there were some challenges that came with that as well. Well, some challenges and then some things that turned out not to be challenges.
Yeah. First of all, IT. Yay. I don't think anybody from IT is on it, but
No.
you are. Yay.
Yeah.
So you're in meditation. I'm sure I wasn't the easiest person to work with. Here's one thing. Remember that my very first goal was to be mobile friendly. And this is an unresolved tension hanging in the air still. Actually, Catherine and I, way back last January, we gave ourselves 2 weeks to go our separate ways and investigate what does it mean to use Canvas in a truly mobile friendly way. And one of the things, of course, I learned is that almost everything I've ever done was wrong. Some of the things, like one of the things, for example, is if somebody's on their phone and it's hard to navigate links that are close to each other. And so one of the things that's recommended, besides, keeping some distance, is to use icons to click on an icon instead of making your finger in that impossible way, click on a link, especially if it's close to another link. So go to the other end of the process. I'm feeling pretty proud about what we created. And one of the very first comments is no icons. And we let that one go. There were some other things that came up around mobile friendly that I didn't let go. And I can't think do you remember what some of those were?
I don't know, honestly.
Yeah, there were just a few things that I'm like, no, it was just so clear that didn't line up. But I do think we as an institution, if what I'm saying resonates with you at all and you're dreaming of a student population that's working on their phones a lot, or you imagine that they're able to use their phones to keep up with work, for example, on the bus, I really do think we need to look at this and really kind of move in that direction where we're not just taking out the pieces that make it mobile friendly.
Yeah, well, the other thing that we had to go the extra mile for, and is very important to go the extra mile, and Cindy's going to love this, is that we spend a lot of time talking about ADA compliance.
Yes.
And making sure that all the images
Yeah.
have proper
Yeah.
descriptions,
Yeah.
that all the text would be in a readable format for the e-readers,
Absolutely.
so that you want to make sure that as many people have access to the content you're putting online as possible.
Oh, this is me.
Yeah, that's good.
So what were the challenges? So, if you hang in with us for, the third session, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but what were the challenges? Not entirely what you might expect. So for example, when Catherine and I came up with what would these different countries be, and we tried to base them, first of all, I did some Googling, like what are the 9 countries that there are the most employees teaching English. And so we kind of based it around that. And then we threw in a little bit of where we thought folks might be most interested. And then also tried to choose countries that we could imagine the images looking different enough from each other so that it would be easier for students reviewing to guess which country it was. So we needed those images. And so I gave the list to Jim. And then we worked out this Google Doc table system where what I would do is I would find images from that country that they really captured something. Maybe it was a picture of a cafe, it was a picture of a classroom. Especially if it was somewhere I traveled, I definitely used my experience of the world. Is this what a classroom really looks like? If students are in this picture in a uniform, is that very, very typical, that kind of thing. So I had these worked out. And then Jim was using AI technology, which, if you hang with us for the next one, we're all going to try that out to create these images. He would actually create several options and then I would go in and choose one. So we've got these different countries. It was easy to figure out for the first, I would say 4 or 5, which country should be associated, because I could say to myself, oh, one of the interviewees is so and so, and they're going to talk extensively about this country. Of course, that's the country that we're going to connect with that. But by the end, we were scrambling, and the only way we could make this work is if we remembered, at least in one of the podcasts, for me to say the name of the country if it didn't come up naturally. So I'd have giant signs taped in front of me saying, say Japan, you know.
A little bit of designing after the fact.
Yeah,
But
it was designing after the
Yeah.
fact. Yeah, it was a little problematic. So that turned out to be a challenge. If I could go back in time, instead of having a 72-page planning document, I would have a 74-page planning document, and I would actually have sketched that out, no matter what Jim said. For excitement, it was pure joy doing those interviews. I really hope that the students taking those courses feel that. First of all, I got to interview my mentors. So Mary Brooks was the director of the ELI when I got hired here as a baby teacher in 96. And she was my mentor, and I interviewed her. I learned how to teach pronunciation from Mark Landa, who's now retired in Portland. And he talked to us about, what do you need to know? Brass tacks about supporting students with pronunciation if you don't know anything else about linguistics. So I also put a reach out to my students who've graduated in the last 5 years, some of them who were teaching overseas. And I got to interview them. It was so fun to hear them as teachers in their own kind of right. So that was so fun. And I wish I could do that part again. The true north, I've got a new true north in for me as an instructor, and that is storyline, threads that connect things. And this is not a way that I've previously thought about my coursework, but there's no going back. And storyline, or some thread that connects it all. That's my true north. Yeah.
Well, a couple of my excitements, primarily is that it all worked. That was the best thing, because everything that I was trying to impart you to try out worked. And it was an experiment, and it's just one of those, I'm not even going to say it's a happy accident because you planned everything else perfectly, but to be able to see you to go to that bookshop and walk around and make those connections with the philosophy and the concepts, and show being in the place doing the thing. Actually, I think seeing you on stage at the Spokane Comedy Club was one of my favorites, because it's a great location.
Yeah.
So one thing I'll harp on when we're talking about doing the videos is go and watch YouTube. Go and watch any instructional video on YouTube that has a person in a place doing the thing that they're talking about, because that is ultimately what is drawing you in, because you want to know about the thing. They're talking about the thing, and they're doing the thing at the place where the thing is happening.
By the way, when you reach out and you ask, people not only say yes, they're really excited. Like, not only did the Spokane Comedy Club say, yes, when do you want to be here? We'll make it work. But they gave me just a huge stack of free passes. So
And you gave some?
I did. Yeah, all of them, actually. All of them. So very quickly, let's quickly just take a look at some highlights. You want to go to the next one? Okay, so I have my glasses on for this. First of all, I wanted to highlight the use of image that we're going to explore next time. So one thing Jim did was to create this tile image of kind of an imagined world. And Catherine had this idea that all 9 courses should use this as the tile image. and we'll use a different colorway for each one, and it totally works. It looks pretty cool on canvas. And then Jim used that behind each of the podcasts as well. And then Jim did this thing where he took an image of me. Actually, it was with my family, but he took an image of me and he created this much better image. I really like this. When my husband saw it, my husband's much older than I am. And when he saw it, he was like, what is that? And I said, you, my friend, are not the target audience. I'm not entirely upset at all that you at your age don't like it, because I really do like it. And I think the students really do. The feedback I got from students, they weren't like, you don't actually look like that. They really liked it. And then every time I did an interview, I would ask someone for a picture and then Jim would snazz it up.
I would run it through the little filter.
And then just what did those videos look like? So for example, one of the courses is on listening. And when I thought about listening and I thought about where would I be, the Manitou Park Duck Pond. Why in the world the Manitou Duck Pond? Because when we're teaching the skill of listening, it looks like a really passive thing. You just see someone, all of you, you're on your screen, you look very relaxed, right? But what we can't see is all the work that you are doing. You're making sense of this just nonstop chatter of sounds coming out of my mouth. If your attention is going away, you're somehow bringing yourself back, right? You're making predictions about what I'm going to say next. And that's just like a duck on a pond. They look like they're just coasting along, but underneath the water, right? They're just pedaling away. So that's an example.
Right.
And then what did it look like with those images? The nine courses, each one had 6 modules, each one has a course. So for example, this is from a course that the answer to which country were we visiting was Japan. And I chose a cafe that looked like a cafe I was in last time I was there. Trying to think. Oh, yes, Dilemma and Key. I completely forgot this piece.
Yeah, right.
So one of the things that Jim said was, think about how do your students, how are they going to actually use what they learn in the course and how could you gamify that? So, okay, there was even more going on. Besides those 6 podcasts, I also thought about someone who I knew had experienced a certain kind of problem. Like, for example, I knew of someone who had taught in Thailand and really experienced a struggle in supporting listening skills, for example. And so what I would do is I would interview them in 2 parts, dilemma and key. So I would open up the course and the students hear me interview someone. They talk about where they were, what they were doing. And then I say, hey, you've shared with me, you had a problem around blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me about that problem? We'd end that interview. And then at the end of the course, students are asked, now knowing what you know, remember that problem that was posed, the dilemma, what would you do? And so they have to type that in. When they do, that opens up the key video and they get to hear what the instructor actually did. All of this is entree into our profession in ways that I really, really wish I would have had when I was getting ready to teach.
I didn't even know you did it that way. That's really awesome. I just remember making fun.
Yeah, so cool. So cool. All right. Join us next time. Jim's going to lead us in hands-on experience. And this time I'm really going to master how to use these technologies, and I'm going to master it solo because I'm a changed instructor. There's no going back. And now I want to redesign all of my campus courses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
All of them. Yeah. So I need to master these technologies to use them solo with no support.
Right. And there's a number of ones that are made very simple for people. But as you want to do more advanced things, kind of like, and a lot of those images, it did require a little bit of photo editing, because if you work with AI at all, you'll understand that you get some pretty weird results at some points. So there is some photo editing involved in some of them. If you are going to be doing video editing or you want to put in text or anything like that, it can get a little bit more complicated, but it's still fairly straightforward, and it can be done with the tools that are available here through Eastern Washington University,
Cool. So, anybody got any questions for us?
either online or in person.
We've got one person in person. Jamel, that was so kind of you. Yeah.
So any other mobile-friendly ideas other than podcasts
Oh,
for
we've got
other
one.
disciplines? Okay. Well, a lot of it is really choose your own.
Dion's got a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Sure.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I'm really excited about this. I thought about this a while back, this idea of gamifying a course. And of course, my first thought was the idea of similar to your story framework, thinking about I'm not a big gamer, but I'm familiar with the idea of sort of setting a storyline at the beginning, going on quests and getting points or coins or something to that effect. But I always felt that that was beyond the scope of what Canvas could provide. And then on top of that, all of the requirements when online courses are reviewed to ensure that they are ADA compliant or meet Eastern's standards for online courses. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to limitations, if any, or for this approach, given the tools that we currently have at our disposal, and perhaps just whether or not it warrants a general conversation, maybe with instructional technology to see what is actually possible.
Sure. There are going to be some limitations inherently through Canvas. I mean, it is a basic web page interface, but a lot of that can be overcome because you can make any number of pages and you can link to those pages. So if you want to present students with a number of choices that they have to make, you can make a page that will outline each different choice scenario. And so if they click on one link, they'll go to one page and they'll see what the outcome is from there. Or if they click on another link, they'll see what the other outcome is from that point of view. It's going to be a lot more building intensive, and you'll need to be able to map out the decision trees ahead of time. But things like that can be done, and the points are pretty much interchangeable with coins if you think about it that way. So, if they received, an 87%, maybe that's 87 or 87 points, for a quiz or a homework assignment, that's 87 coins. And then maybe once they reach a certain amount of those points, that can be redeemable for some kind of in-course prize, whether that's avoiding a quiz or some other kind of thing that you can think of. So there's other options available for that.
But what I'm hearing you say is that you can see ways that it can move forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's just-
Yeah.
I used to teach Arabic, and there are a lot of platforms. One that I really used, I liked, which is like actually a lot of gamification, is Word Wall. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
So you can integrate it with Canvas, and it's really good.
I'm sure there's
Yeah.
probably a number of tools out there that are integratable with Canvas. It would take it. A lot of this is experimental, so it's
Yeah.
doing a little research, finding out what tools are out there and available, and then playing with them to see what works.
Yeah.
I did want to talk with the other mobile friendly ideas other than podcasts. So mobile friendly ideas. So podcasts are great, but it would really depend on what other disciplines we're talking about. So, like, Avinash, did you have any specific disciplines in mind that maybe?
Say my background is computer science, so yeah.
Well, I would say instead maybe of podcasts that are like interview based, it would be more storyline based. So if you're in computer science, imagine a scenario where the students would be using the skills and the content that you're teaching them. Are they going to be working for a security firm? Are they going to be working for a government agency? And what scenarios would they be in those different jobs where they would come across opportunities to use those tools and skills? And so maybe the podcast isn't so much an interview with somebody else, it's you telling the story of what the scenario is, and then it's their job to use the tools that they have in that weekly content to solve a challenge that you're presenting to them through that story.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Probably I can now frame like relate something once you pointed this out. Thank you. Yeah.
That's what I really want to get across is everything starts with the story. We're human beings. We grow up watching and learning from all these different types of stories, whether it's TV shows, whether it's movies, whether it's radio, podcasts. You already have all of these stories that you have listened to and watched throughout your entire life that have informed the content that you are a fan of. So use that content. It's been or it's in you. You have it. You can, impart that to your students.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that it'll work for you to join us for the Technology Petting Zoo. If folks join us online, they'll still be able to follow along, right?
Sure. I'll basically be walking through a couple demonstrations on how to use things like Adobe Podcast. We'll go through maybe a couple different image generation options that might be out there. And then the university has quite a few tools that are freely available for faculty and staff as far as AI is concerned. So they're really, really great tools.
Cool. Thank you all for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Oh, thanks, John.
Okay. Thank you.